Let's talk about cryptids. Welcome to Weary Lore and welcome to my Cryptids of America series. In this series, I will be introducing you to one cryptid from each state in America, giving you a short explanation of their history and story, and then giving my opinion on the cryptid, where I think it came from, and what I think it could be. Now, I am aiming to not do well-known cryptids. I want to learn about new cryptids and pass that knowledge on to you. I won't be talking about Sasquatch or the Abominable Snowman or how I think they're the same thing. I won't be talking about the Wendigo or El Chupacabra. We all know about those cryptids. Let's learn about some new ones. In this series, I will be doing 5 states in each episode with a total of 10 episodes. Let's get into it. Welcome to episode 7 of Cryptids of America. Today, we will be exploring cryptids from New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, North Dakota, and Ohio. Talking about New Mexico without talking about Roswell and aliens is nearly impossible. The legend of the spaceship crashing in Roswell, New Mexico is known far and wide. Aliens are a majorly popular cryptid in New Mexico, but are they the most popular? I would actually say that they tie as the most popular rather than taking the title as a runaway victory. There are 2 other cryptids that are reported on just as much as aliens are. Those cryptids are La Llorona and the Chupacabra. I wasn't surprised by any of these. I was actually worried that New Mexico wouldn't have any other cryptids for me to research. El Coco, a familiar name. El Coca, El Cuckoo, El Cucuy. This cryptid goes by many names. El Coco does not only inhabit New Mexico, it chooses its habitat not by location, but by language. You can find El Coco anywhere that Spanish is spoken. El Coco's description varies from sighting to sighting. Sometimes this cryptid is nothing but glowing red eyes looking at you from under your bed. Other times, it's an enormous, hairy beast with a mouthful of razor-sharp teeth and long claws like knives perched atop your rooftop. El Coco's attacks are swift and brutal. The creature is a boogeyman of sorts, a monster that steals or eats bad children when they misbehave. No child ever taken by El Coco has ever been seen again. It is unknown truly where or when El Coco as a cryptid exists today originated. It is believed that El Coco originated in northern Portugal and Galicia. The earliest written work found to reference El Coco is found in Gil Vicente's Auto da Barca do Inferno, which was written in 1517. El Coco is the devil character in this play. Where or when Gil Vicente heard about this creature in order to write it into his play, well, that's unknown. 500 years have passed since then, and El Coco is still spoken about and cited until this very day. In a more recent day sighting that I was able to find, an unnamed person spoke about their encounter with El Coco while they were a student in a Catholic boarding school. They admitted that they performed very badly at this school, and one night, when getting up to use the restroom, they saw a creature that was almost 7 feet tall. A monster that called out to them by name, beckoning them to come forward. As many school children would, this person passed out from their fear, awakening to the creature gone. What are my thoughts? The boogeyman is too far spread for there not to be some truth behind the legend. Somewhere, at some point in history, there was something that preyed upon naughty children, and this something spread across the world. The name may change, the description may change, but every culture has their boogeyman, and El Coco is one of them. I am well aware that there are real, terrifying people out there who would commit atrocities like this, but I believe they are few and far between. As with our boogeyman, the bugbear, the night runners, the sandman, the list could go on and on. El Coco is more of a legend, a myth used as a cautionary tale to scare children into obedience. Take that as you will, but that's what these cryptids are used for, and they are very effective. Do I believe that a supernatural cryptid who eats naughty children is out there, just waiting and listening for its next prey? Well, not really. I'm still here, aren't I? Are you from New Mexico? Have you ever had an encounter with El Coco? Let me know. When New York comes to mind, claustrophobia and agoraphobia come to mind. I've heard stories about apartments so small that they might as well be closets, and sidewalks so congested that a person can get trampled. The only cryptid other than Bigfoot that I associated with New York was the Rat King, and that's a very real thing. It held cryptid status at one point, but they have been found living and breathing and terrifying. I did not expect New York's most popular cryptid to be a lake monster. I have heard of Champ, but as I always saw the cryptid as a Loch Ness Monster copy, I never looked into it. However, it is the cryptid at the top of every list, beating out even Bigfoot. But there are plenty of cryptids to look into other than those. The cryptid that caught my attention for New York is the Kinderhook Blob. I have to admit, it was the name that first drew me in. Calling a cryptid nothing other than the blob? Interesting. But it makes sense. The Kinderhook Blob is described in a couple different ways. In its first sighting, it's described as making a whistling sound and appearing as a ghostly, floating, blob-shaped creature that peeked out from behind a tree. In additional sightings, it was said to stomp around a tent. Floating, stomping, whatever, and look like a stereotypical sheet ghost, bell-shaped and sheet and all. It was even described as looking like the Virgin Mary at one point. The Kinderhook Blob did not attack in any of the at least 6 reported encounters. It left some people with quite a fright, but it didn't physically harm them. The first encounter with the Kinderhook Blob occurred in 1962. A 10-year-old boy stated that he and his cousin were in the woods behind their house when they heard a high-pitched whistle. When looking up to see what had made the sound, they saw the blob peering at them from behind a tree. It wasn't until 2 years later that the Kinderhook Blob was seen again. This time it was seen by an unnamed adult who was so terrified of it that they ran away. He returned later with a friend, carrying shovels and pitchforks. Pitchforks? Is it the 1700s? Skipping forward, the latest sighting seems to be in 2017. 2 town locals were on a late-night walk when the temperature suddenly dropped, and they heard a high-pitched screech. They were then approached by the Kinderhook Blob and ran in fear. What are my thoughts? I was ready to completely write this cryptid off as nothing but the imagination of children, because multiple of its sightings were by children. But then adults became involved. That gave me pause. It's no secret that the stereotypical ghost in a white sheet image has been around a long time. Pinning down when it first came to be may not be impossible, but it was something I was unable to find. The depiction seems to come from the practice of wrapping the deceased in funeral shrouds, which often looked like white sheets. So, when they came back as ghosts, they looked like when they were buried, in amorphous shape under a white sheet. This practice dates all the way back to sometime between the late 1st century BCE and the 4th century BCE. That is an unbelievably long time. However, that still doesn't make this cryptid legitimate. Could the locals of Kinderhook have seen something? Of course. But was it a cartoon ghost in a white sheet? I don't think so. This cryptid seems to be more like the imagination running wild to me. Are you from New York? Have you ever had an encounter with a Kinderhook Blob? Let me know. I was excited to start my search into North Carolina because I know that a swath of the Appalachian Mountains run through North Carolina. Everyone who knows anything about cryptids and the creepy, scary things that go bump in the night know that the Appalachian Mountains are rife with cryptids and monsters. I absolutely intended to report on something from the mountains, but here we are. Before I go any further, North Carolina's most popular cryptid might just come from the mountains, the Moon-Eyed People. They're a fascinating tale, but they are at the top of nearly every list on North Carolina's cryptids. Of course, Bigfoot is also a largely popular cryptid in North Carolina. I wasn't surprised by this, because of the amount of perfect hiding places for him there. The cryptid that I'm going to tell you about in this entry actually inhabits mostly wooded swamps near small villages where there are cattle and hogs. The Santer, one of the many phantom cats in the United States, is believed to be either related to or the same creature as the Wampus cat, which is related to a lovable cryptid that I did a short on, the cactus cat. The Santer is described as a cat with a long body with red or sometimes gray fur. It has a bald head with small eyes, but its most defining feature is its tail. It has 8 hard knots along its tail, and its tail is unnaturally strong. It does not often attack humans, but it's able to use its tail to knock out a cow or a pig in order to take it for its meal. I'm sure it could do some damage to a human. A person, though, most likely won't even see the Santer, as it's supernaturally fast. However, they'll know it's near due to its call, a piercing, baby-like wail. Even if it's rare to see the Santer, there have been sightings. It is believed that the first sighting originated in the late 19th century. In 1890, a police officer claimed to see the creature and shoot at it. By this time, the Santer had already allegedly eaten 7 pigs and 15 cows. As the 1890s continued, the Santer continued to be sighted. However, in 1897, the Santer was supposedly caught. It was caught alive and put on exhibit, said to be a jaguar-type creature. But if the Santer was caught, how is there a news article in 1949 reporting on it? Is the article correct? Is the creature more than one, a breeding population? Official reports of the Santer ended in the 1920s, but then a new creature, the Wampus cat, started to be seen. Are they one and the same? A new name for a new generation? What are my thoughts? In present day, the only wildcat native to North Carolina is the bobcat. Looking at the bobcat and the Santer's descriptions, the only true similarities are the coat color, as the Santer was said to sometimes have gray fur, and the fact that they're both cats. But let's look at the time when this story actually took place. In the late 19th century and early 20th century, cougars were native to North Carolina. Cougars look much different than bobcats. In the right lighting, their fur could definitely look orange or red. They have longer legs, longer tails, and they're larger. There's also a genetic quirk with cats that can happen that causes their tails to look kinked. This can also happen due to injury or break in the tail. If there are multiple kinks close together, it could look like the tail is knotted. If this is a genetic condition, multiple generations of cats would have the abnormality. But there's a much simpler explanation. Newspapers at the time created sensationalized stories. One of the ones I showed you, the landmark Statesville, was especially guilty of this. Could there have been wildcats in the area that started the animal disappearances that started the campfire stories? Absolutely. But everything else was sensationalized embellishment. Are you from North Carolina? Have you ever had an encounter with a Santer? Let me know. North Dakota is another one of those states where I drew an absolute blank. Whipping out a fun fact about any state in the United States is never going to be my hat trick at a party. Even looking up what North Dakota was known for was like a shot in the dark, much like looking into its cryptids. Out of all the states I've done, I believe that I've found the one with the slimmest pickings. There are the big ones, Bigfoot, Wendigo, the Thunderbird, But other than that, there's not a whole lot here. Without a doubt, North Dakota's most popular cryptid is Miniwashitu. You cannot get away from this strange creature when you put in North Dakota cryptid. Beyond that, there's alien encounters and ghosts, but not much else. There are legends in North Dakota, but a legend does not a cryptid make. The Devil's Lake Monster, also known as the Devil's Lake Serpent, also known as the Devil's Lake Sea Serpent, seriously people, can we stick with one name? Inhabits Devil's Lake, North Dakota. There are a couple different descriptions for this creature. I'll start with the simplest one. In this description, the Devil's Lake Monster is a snake-type creature with a long winding body, around 50 to 60 feet long, and a head resembling a snake's. It has shiny scales and glowing eyes. The first published account of the Devil's Lake Monster describes it a little differently. In this account, it's still described as serpentine, but it's said to have alligator jaws and glowing red eyes. It moves slowly. It's a slimy, green color and has enormous fins along its body. It also has horns or something like them protruding from its jaw. No matter the description, the Devil's Lake Monster is not a pacifistic creature. It's mean and dangerous. It will swallow a person whole and be ready to do the same to another. As with other creatures that originated in Native American mythology, tracking down a first sighting of this cryptid just isn't possible. It has been a legend passed down by the Sioux tribe for who knows how long. The first published account, which I referenced in the description, was in 1894. I looked for this news article, but I wasn't able to find anything more than what had been quoted. I don't know why the creature was being talked about, and why it was being described. In 1904, a mass sighting of the creature happened. This was purportedly reported across the nation, but I once again couldn't find a news article. In February of 1941, there was an entry in the Minneapolis Star-Journal about the Devil's Lake Monster, given the moniker of the Devil's Lake Sea Monster in this entry. However, this seems to just be a retelling of the tale, not reports of new sightings. As recently as 2017, an article was written online, questioning if the Devil's Lake Monster had returned. This article included pictures of what was supposedly the elusive cryptid. Could it have been hiding, not sighted, for all these years? What are my thoughts? Like with Sinkhole Sam, if something is described as a big snake, I consider it to be a big snake. The Devil's Lake Monster having multiple descriptions kind of muddles that up some. First, let's look at the size of Devil's Lake. Is it large enough to be a habitat for this creature? Devil's Lake covers more than 160,000 acres. That's hard to put into perspective, but let's try. Let's say this. 1 acre of land is roughly equivalent to 1 football field. An acre is actually a little bit smaller. It's about 75% the size of a football field. So let's say it's 150,000 football fields. That's a lot of water that something could be in. There's a number of snakes that are native to North Dakota, but none of them come close to the size of the Devil's Lake Monster. Could we be dealing with another escaped exotic? Possibly. There are snakes that can grow up to 30 feet long, and things in the water look bigger than they actually are. But this doesn't explain the fins or the alligator teeth, or the horns. There is an eel called a snake eel that has fins, and if you look at its mouth, it kinda looks different than a normal snake's. Maybe it could be confused with having alligator teeth. Snake eels live in rivers and can grow up to 10 feet long. Some snakes also have horns. They don't grow from their jaws, from what I could find, but there's also a condition that causes horns or horn-like growths to grow from pretty much anywhere. Could this creature be some type of undiscovered biological crossover? Maybe. We can't know until it's caught. but it's more likely that it's an embellished Native American legend and the sightings are nothing but logs in the water. Are you from North Dakota? Have you ever had an encounter with a Devil's Lake monster? Let me know. Ohio, Ohio, my home state, and that's the most important fact that you need to know about Ohio. I was born and Ohio got better. On a more serious note, serving up a lot of corn and one of the best candies ever, Ohio also serves up a litany of cryptids, and I'm ashamed to say that I didn't know about a good deal of them. The cryptid that got the most screen time during my childhood was the Mothman, and he didn't even originate in Ohio. Of course, there was Bigfoot and a list of lake monsters that I vaguely knew about, but some names that I saw meant nothing to me. There's a Charles Mill Lake monster, a monster at the lake where I camped every summer of my childhood. Now, I saw a lot of strange things at Charles Mill, but a lake monster wasn't one of them. Popularity-wise, Ohio's version of Bigfoot, the Grassman, and, as I said, the Mothman are most likely the most popular. I could have spent hours looking into Ohio's cryptids. There really are that many, but, well, I already had a request. The Loveland frogman, also known as the Loveland lizard, is a humanoid frog. Yep, you heard that correctly. The Loveland frogman inhabits Loveland, Ohio, a small town in central Ohio. It stands between 3 and 4 feet tall and weighs in around 50 to 75 pounds. This cryptid has leathery skin that is green, like a frog's, and has a frog's face. There are also reports that a group of frogmen carry wands. They live under decrepit bridges and wield wands that they are able to spray sparks from. There are no attacks attributed to the Loveland frogmen. They have mostly been sighted at a distance, and even when they are sighted up close, their movements towards people do not seem to be aggressive. The first sighting of the Loveland frogmen was on March 3, 1972. One of the small town's police officers, Ray Shockey, sighted the creature near the Little Miami River. It ran across the road in front of his car, and he was able to see it clearly in his headlights. It moved like a frog until encountering the guardrail, where it stood up like a human and climbed over it before continuing on. Just a couple weeks later, another police officer, Mark Matthews, spotted the creature and dispatched it. When investigating the evidence, the police officers came to the conclusion that it was the same creature that Ray had seen, and it was just a large iguana that had lost its tail. But if that's true, then how, in 2016, did a couple encounter the frogmen while out playing Pokemon Go? Of everything that game has led to, of course, it leads to a cryptid. An image was caught of the creature this time, a very grainy and blurry image, but there's clearly something in the water. What are my thoughts? I know that giant amphibians and lizards can exist. It could be as simple as that. I know that frogs do exist in Ohio. Do I think that a 3 to 4 foot tall frog exists in Ohio? No. Even the largest frog to ever live, which doesn't live anymore, the Beelzebufo empinga, or devil frog, only grew to about 16 inches and 10 pounds. They're also native to Madagascar, when they were alive, 65 to 70 million years ago. Now, if you've watched my channel before, you know that I don't believe extinct means extinct. Could these frogs still be alive somewhere? Maybe. But they still wouldn't account for the Loveland frogman's size. Now, a giant lizard. That's another story. Ohio has 4 native species of lizards, news to me, and 1 invasive species of lizards, so that's 5 in total. How big are they? They're not. The largest is a foot long, so that's not really an explanation either. The police officers believed the creature they saw to be an escaped pet iguana. Iguana are green, they have leathery skin, they hang out in strange places, and they can grow an average of 5.6 feet long. Take away its tail, and 4 feet long doesn't seem out of the question. Surprisingly, iguana can also stand on their hind legs. If that's not creepy. But what about the picture? I have to admit this is a very personal stance on that picture. But it looks like a person with something reflective on their head. All of this said, I lean towards the Loveland frogman being a case of misidentification over anything else. Are you from Ohio? Have you ever had an encounter with a Loveland frogman? Let me know. I have to admit, I was so excited to do my own home state in this episode. The fact that I had a request on what cryptid to cover was even better. From learning about a Spanish boogeyman with a strangely familiar name, to learning new information about a place where I lived for 3 decades, this video was an absolute joy to research. Except for North Dakota. I hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to check out the other episodes in the series. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.